G'day there ladies and gents, it's Connor here again and we are back with some more stories from Reddit. As usual, if you enjoyed these videos, be sure to hit like and subscribe and all that stuff, and let's get straight into the stories. Alrighty folks, we're on True Off My Chest. This one was written by a throwaway account, and it's titled, My Friendship Blew Up on a Trip to Japan. Finding out my friend of 5 years was an absolute a-hole when taking her on her first trip to Japan 1 year after I moved back from there. What did she do? Wouldn't add to the itinerary at all, but complained every single day when we got there. I took her to popular stations in Tokyo since it was her first time and we had 7 days, but she wanted to go to the beaches and rise at 5 AM and stay out till like 2 AM like she does in Mexico. Compared everything to Mexico, even wanting to tip a restaurant owner in USD because I do it in Mexico. Wanted to tip everyone and argued the whole time when I told her don't do it. It's rude, and when I got my Japanese friend to educate her on how to give proper thanks, she finds one person online who said it's not required but appreciated and wouldn't stop pressing me about how it's so good to tip. She would ask me how my legs were doing and I'd answer honestly like, yeah, they hurt, and she later mocked and berated me, saying it made her feel bad I was complaining about my legs. I never said they hurt out of my own accord, nor did I stop what we were doing or ask for breaks. If she asked, I said yeah, but she'd rather I'd lie. I asked if she was thirsty while we waited for open hours, and she said no, so I went to find me a coffee shop to grab one real quick. She goes, I don't even want to go there, you should have taken me to a real cafe. Girl, I'm just grabbing me a drink since you said no. Doesn't believe in itineraries, yet hated everywhere I took her, so got her friend back home to look up places for her. She had 6 months to look up anything to add, but she doesn't believe in itineraries. Got mad I didn't order for her when she didn't ask me to help. Said, if we were in Mexico I would have ordered for you. All she said was she was thinking about getting a bun today. She didn't end up ordering it herself because she didn't want to point to it and ask the cashier. I was standing 10 steps away from her. There was no one in line, and we were the only ones in the store. Not sure why she didn't even attempt to order a bun in the case or ask me to help her. Started saying she should have gone on this trip with friend A or friend B to my face. Said she didn't like touristy areas, aka Shibuya, Asakusa, Harajuku, and wanted to go to rural areas while she doesn't even speak Japanese and was relying on me to quite literally hold her hand for everything. She's older than me, but both late 20s by the way. She said she was going to leave the trip early if we spent a day with my sister at our Japanese friend's house. She wouldn't eat sushi because they have worms in them, wouldn't go to karaoke because they were listening, said I made her cry, which she's only ever done at her dad's funeral, wow, called dried squid a gag gift she can get her family, accused me of cutting her luggage and wouldn't take out yen from the ATM, so I did and she paid me back. Tried to tell me data works fine compared to our pocket Wi-Fi and that we could just leave the Wi-Fi at the hotel when I asked her to hold it for us. I lived in Japan and will not go anywhere without a pocket Wi-Fi. This isn't even half of it. A whole 7-day nightmare. For the first time in my life, I actually slept through an entire 9-hour plane ride on the way back. Edit to add, I totally forgot some of the more effed up things, like asking, do you have an eating disorder? Or telling me she was going to smack my hand because I had it near my nose as I was choking on so much secondhand smoke, my throat was getting raspy, and trying to convince me it was my fault that I was getting inappropriate stuff happening to me. Example, a man chased me down the streets of Ikebukuro wanting to go to a hotel, but it's my fault because I was standing alone at the station. Anyone want to guess the profession she's pursuing? Oh my god, what an absolute nightmare. As far as the profession, I don't know. Usually it's a job that requires them taking care of someone, or a job that requires opposite traits of what they display. Opie answers some comments. Someone says Opie needs to get new friends, and how old is the friend? Opie says, I told her off the day after we landed, then blocked her everywhere. She's 28, I'm 26. Opie comments on ending the friendship after the trip. Something about trips and friendships. This girl you would never guess because if you met her, she's mama bear, polite, well-mannered, fiercely independent and caring. I doubt people in real life would believe this is her. Once she was out of her element, she turned into the literal spawn of Satan. I wanted to leave her so bad, but I couldn't bring myself to because it's a very foreign country to her. Once she threatened to leave the trip early though, I literally started looking at flights for her and showed her the options, lol. That ticked her off even more because I was on my phone all throughout dinner. Opie gives an example of her friend's reaction when going to a place for breakfast. No, literally, I left a bunch of stuff out because it's a lot, but our compromise to visiting my friend's house was I would go alone for a couple of hours while she waited at the hotel. Before I left, I convinced her to try going to Konbini, which was right next door to our hotel, alone, to get breakfast, and she did, came back and said she would never do that again. Want to know why? Some other foreigner saw her and was trying to chat with her. I don't know if he was real or not, but she was like, "Yeah, see? Nope, I'm not doing that again." She's Mexican, which is why she kept bringing it up and telling me she was going to force me to go to Mexico so I can see how hard it is to order stuff or whatever, and that she wouldn't go to my friend's house because how would you feel if I took you to Mexico and wanted to visit my brother-in-law? But honestly, I could have used that situation and thrown her misogyny right back at her face. "Oh, a man talked to you? You must have looked approachable, or it's what you're wearing." Everything she said to me, lol. She thought I was crazy to suggest this and that I was wasting her hard-earned money to sit around and hang out, and said that when people want to hang out, it means all day, and everyone around her knows that hang out means all day. Also said that later means later today, which was a whole different thing. I digress. But instead of asking me how long, she flips her bananas and tells me she should have gone on this trip with friend A if I wanted to see friends. This is what made her cry. Oh god, it's exhausting just to read. And forget about booking her flights to go home early, just book her a flight to Mexico since she loves it so much. Onto an update. So I got a lot more responses and questions than I thought I would get on my last post. I figured I would share more about it for those who are interested. I also wanted to thank everyone who told me their own story of disaster trips. Some felt really relatable. Also, big thank you to those who asked me for Tokyo recommendations, and those who said they would have been glad to have me as a guide. That made me really happy. I actually had 2 friendships that ended over that trip, and overall I felt really taken advantage of and underappreciated. Thank you all for helping sort some of those feelings by sharing your thoughts. Of course, this was a huge lesson learned, and I'll do my best to move forward with more caution and maturity. A little more context to what I went through. Got mad I told her no, I don't need her to hold my bag. Got mad I told her I didn't want to walk 1 hour to our destination because she chose the route with 1 train with a 40-minute walk. I chose one with 3 transfers and a 10-minute walk. I said I put my compressions in my check-in on accident, and she replies, "Well, I'm smart," and packed mine in my backpack. Told me she couldn't help with adding to the itinerary or join study sessions because she had family issues she didn't want to tell me about, and didn't understand how that doesn't give her a pass to complain the whole time. She would agree to leave an area, but then make snarky comments about how she liked the previous area more. Told me sarcastically that I'm always right when I tried to tell her she was reading a Japanese person's response wrong. As if I didn't know the concept of tatame and hon, lol. Blew up at me for being on my phone at dinner. I was navigating the whole time and we shared a hotel and bed. The only time I got to check in with my fam was when we sat down to eat. Kept saying her family, who was tracking her, was asking why we're at a laundromat or why we're at a mall and not outside. Would compare me to friend A like, oh, she would have understood my joke. Used my other friend problem I was having against me, saying she understands why my friend did what she did. Yapped about how she hates Selena Gomez for writing a song about her ex, and when I told her nearly every singer and songwriter does, she told me to list names, so I listed people and she said, "No, but name male singers though." Heard my favourite group XG play in Shibuya, and when I got excited she goes, "Ew," only because they're a girl group. Acted like me making an itinerary meant that we couldn't walk into random shops along the way. Anytime we went somewhere spontaneously or didn't make a reservation, she would be like, "See, this is how I travel. I just go with the flow because I do better under pressure." Anyways, so some people had mentioned how I didn't see any of this behaviour prior to going on the trip, and I'll be honest and say there were red flags in our relationship which I saw, and I actually did distance myself from her. But after I moved to Japan and came back, I was in this weird position and really wanted to reconnect with my old friends and establish a support system again. So I decided to start fresh with her, which obviously was a mistake, and I got what I deserved. She started changing during the pandemic, in which her and friend A got really close as we were barely talking at the time. I talked to a mutual friend of ours recently, and we both suspect that friend A had a part in fueling her toxic behaviour. We always knew her as a sort of mama bear that took care of everyone and is super well-mannered and self-righteous. Everyone in real life likes her and looks up to her, but as one commenter pointed out, those good qualities are actually a disguise. She needs to be in control, and once she was out of her element and not in control, she completely lost her cool and was actually very verbally abusive. Which brings me to the next answer to everyone's question. She is pursuing to be a detective or police officer. It's more fitting rather than ironic. She appears disciplined, morally superior and dominant, but she's simply judgmental and controlling, and it's scary to think someone like her will have more power and influence. The next thing I want to address is people asking why did she even want to go to Japan. I kind of think it's simple. I invited her and said I know of good places and can take us around. I think a lot of people in my life want me to take them to Japan because it's easier to go with someone who knows how to travel there. She wasn't someone who ever dreamt of going to Japan, but the opportunity came up and she took it. She's more of a career boo to be honest, but nevertheless, she was excited to go. She even started texting friend A on our trip, saying they were going to make it up to her and go to Kyoto next year, and that I could join, lol. Even though she told me to my face, no offense, but I'm never traveling with you again. The last thing people are asking is what I said to her when I ended it. So when we got back to the States, basically I started blocking her on everything. I argued with her for 7 days, and everything that came out of her mouth was a complaint or insult, so I had zero energy to go back and forth. I already know that nothing will change her mind or open her eyes. She texted me asking why she couldn't find my username anymore, and I said this. Quote, "Girl, no way we are friends anymore after the way you behaved all throughout the trip. Never in my life have I heard a grown adult complain that much and not know how to communicate without an attitude, gaslighting, and being condescending. You were ethnocentric, extremely judgmental, and ableist. You said a lot of racist microaggressions and misogynistic things, and the fact that people can't even be honest with you, or that you can't be honest with others, is wild. You'd rather not hear the truth because honesty makes you feel bad. The entire time you talked about how you normally do things with your friends and family, and all it told me was that you're not very adaptable. But yeah, there was way too many unpleasant behaviours and things said that showed your true colours, and I don't want any further involvement." Then I blocked her, but I got a new phone and saw she read it, so that's that. I'm not hurt, but I'm really bummed about my trip to Japan being ruined. Oh well, yeah, it's disappointing, but you can put a line through that one now. What are your thoughts about this one? Let me know in the comments. Maybe you've had a similar experience. I hope not, for your sake. Anyway, moving on. Okay, we're back over on relationships. This one was written by user Ace Tacy Liss Acid, and it's titled, "Found out that my boyfriend was about to propose to me, then changed his mind. Help." I've been with my boyfriend John for 5 years. We have a pretty awesome relationship, great communication, fun, easygoing with good chemistry. We've always talked about getting married, and I have or had no doubts that we would be getting engaged very soon. Recently, John, myself, John's closest friend and his girlfriend went on a trip to Vegas for several days. We had a great time, all 4 of us, and on our last night there, John told us he wanted to go to the Bellagio fountains to see them before we had to leave. Everyone was up for it. We went for a nice dinner beforehand, and then began watching the fountains, and the music came on. It was really romantic, and I was really enjoying myself, and that's when John grabbed my wrist. He turned me towards him, and I saw that he was sweating profusely. Like, his face was bright red, and he looked like he was about to pass out from trembling so hard. The whole time it looked like he was about to say something, but he never did. He just informed all of us that he wasn't feeling well, and wanted to go back to the hotel. Our friends looked really puzzled, and were whispering into each other's ears all the way back to the hotel. I kept asking John if he was okay, and he just said he probably had too much to drink. We've been back for a couple of weeks, and he's been acting really distant and cold. I honestly knew something weird was up that night in Vegas, so I called up John's friend's girlfriend, who I'm fairly close to, and asked her if she knew what was going on with John, since he had been at their place a lot this past week instead of coming home. Eventually, she spilled the beans and told me he had plans of proposing to me that night at the fountains, but then didn't. That's why the 2 of them had been acting so confused. I kept grilling her, and she also told me that John had told his friend that it didn't feel right. She made me promise not to tell John that I knew because she didn't want anyone to be upset with her. I'm feeling sick to my stomach. We live together and he's been spending all of his time at his friend's house or at his parents' place since we got back. He barely calls me or responds to my texts anymore. I don't know what happened that night, but I feel like he's about to end things. I want to talk to him, but I don't know how to approach the issue. Do I just say, "Hey, I heard you were going to pop the question the other night but changed your mind. What gives?" Was he really nervous? I'm freaking out. Yeah, I suppose getting nervous and getting cold feet explains the initial reaction, but him being distant after the fact is not a good sign, at least in my eyes. I don't know, let's go to the comments. A lot of people are brushing this off as proposal jitters, but they're glossing over the fact that he's been distant literally and emotionally. It doesn't sound like the type of situation where he's just going to plan another proposal. You should ask him what's wrong, because it's pretty clear that something is. If he guesses that you know, don't lie. But you don't necessarily need to confront him about the proposal. What you need is to find out why he's freaking out in general. My guess is cold feet in terms of being confused / panicked / unprepared regarding that permanent level of commitment, but you really need to talk to him to find out. Opie replies, "If he hadn't been acting distant and practically ignoring me, I'd attribute it to feeling nervous in the moment. He's typically very open with me and will straight up tell whether something is bothering him or not. This is what confuses me the most. He's coming home soon. I'll talk to him about it." This topic is actually pretty easy to broach without incriminating your friend. Just ask him where he stands on getting married someday. You've been together for a long time, and it's really not unusual for couples to discuss things at this stage in your relationship. Give him a chance to openly and honestly air his feelings about getting married to you before jumping to any conclusions. Let him know that it's safe to talk to you about it, even if he thinks you aren't going to like what he says. It might be a tough conversation for both of you, especially if it really is a "I'm not sure if I want to get married to you" conversation, but it really does just need to happen. Edit to clarify, do not ask him if he was going to propose to you. Ask him generally what his feelings are on getting married at some point in your life, and let the conversation flow naturally. He bought the ring, he told his friends, and he was a moment from doing it. I don't think the issue lies with your relationship so much as the moment may literally not have been right. He might have envisioned it going down differently, and in following through with his plan, things didn't play out the way he expected and wanted to create a better situation. Of course, you need to actually talk to him about the whole thing to get the full story, but I do think you shouldn't start worrying until it's time to start worrying. If the fountains weren't going right, he felt a bit too drunk, or some drunk guy was yelling on the corner, he may not have wanted that to be the memory you both share forever. I would approach him with the point that you really felt something was off about his behaviour that night, and because he wouldn't tell you, you went to one of your friends, learned the truth, and want to talk about it. It's important you make clear that you only went outside the relationship for the truth because he wasn't telling you anything, and you were worried. Otherwise, he might be concerned that he can't trust his friends with that kind of information, or that you don't trust him to be honest with you. Either way, just talk with him and get the stress off of yourselves. Yeah, I think the general consensus there is that talk to him. Let's go to an update. Hello everyone. I apologise for not updating sooner, but a lot has happened. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who posted comments and to those who tried to reassure me. So John came home last night around 11:30 as I was watching TV in our bedroom. He came in and looked like absolute crap. His eyes looked tired and baggy and he smelled like beer. He apologised to me for the way he'd been acting recently and told me he knew that I knew about the almost proposal as he'd talked to his friend Mike, and he told John that his girlfriend Tara had told me everything. He basically said to me that he had the whole thing planned out. He was going to propose and Tara and Mike would take pictures. Then we would go back to a romantic, more expensive room in our hotel, which Mike and Tara had to end up staying in that night so as to make sure I wasn't aware of the fact that John was supposed to propose. They switched keycards while I was walking back. He then told me what I was afraid of. It just didn't feel right. I was looking at you and it just wasn't what I wanted. Ouch. He told me that he'd been nervous ever since he bought the ring, but that he'd thought it would go away once he actually proposed. In the moment, he said he knew that it was not what he wanted, and thought it would be better to not ask me to marry him because he knew it wasn't what he'd want in the long run. So at this point I'm in hysterics, as I pretty much know that this is the end of the relationship. I tried to be calm and rational about it, but there was one point where I was crying so hard that I literally got down on my knees, put my head in his lap while he sat on the couch, and just kept incoherently saying please in between sobs. Not my proudest moment, but at that moment, this man was my best friend, the future father of my children. I just never, ever in a million years pictured our relationship coming to this point. He ended it with me last night because it didn't feel right, and that's all he could say to me, over and over. It just doesn't feel right anymore. I can't see myself with you. At that point, I could barely breathe. Feels like I'm having a panic attack, so I call my mum and she comes to pick me up from our place. My poor mum, she just looked so helpless while I sat there in the car crying so hard I eventually got a nosebleed. So I wish I could say this is the end of the story, but more has happened since last night. This morning, I'm on Facebook, looking through a bunch of old pictures of John and me, sobbing uncontrollably and sending him text after text with reasons why we should be together, and I eventually stumble on Mike's page through a tagged photo. He updated his status from a few hours ago to something along the lines of, "California was amazing, wish work would send me for more than 5 days." My stomach started doing flips because John kept telling me he was spending the days he was practically ignoring me with Mike, but Mike was in California for several days, and we're in Canada, so not very close. I freaked. I called Mike from my house phone, and when he answered, I said, "Hey, it's OP," and all he could say after a few seconds of silence was, the F word. Basically, Mike's been covering for John's ass while John is spending time with the girl he's been apparently banging for the past 6 months. I know this girl. John works with her, and she's always been really sweet to me whenever I've seen her at John's work-related events. Mike told me that John had told him he was falling in love with her. He said this after the incident in Vegas. He's been spending almost all of the past 2 weeks with her. Mike then told me he had promised not to say a word to anyone, not even Tara, but he felt guilty and was glad I called him. He apologized and said if I had to tell John that he told me, I could. That's all I know for now. I haven't bothered contacting John yet, and I don't know if Mike told him that I know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've been throwing up all day. I took one of my mum's Ativans and I'm feeling a bit calmer right now, but whenever I think about it, which is practically all that consumes my thoughts, I feel disgusted, humiliated and devastated. It actually feels like my heart is breaking in two, and I have no control. I need to get my stuff from our place. I need to find a new place. We have a dog. Who gets the dog? I love my dog. It all feels so surreal. Ugh. Oh my god, I know we were all hopeful he was just a bit nervous for the proposal, but it just got worse and worse. Now for a final update via the same post. John called me a bunch of times while I was in a drug-induced/depression coma. I woke up as he was calling me again and kinda just answered the phone without thinking about it. He was crying and apologizing. I guess Mike told him that I knew, and saying he was confused. He asked me where I was, and I lied and said I was with my sister an hour away from here at her place. I asked him if he was with her. He said yes, but that he'd be home tomorrow, so could I please meet him to talk about things at our house? I said sure. I asked my mum to drive me to our place a little while ago, and I kidnapped my dog, brought her back, and I'm feeling much better. I'm also not meeting with him tomorrow. You guys, I didn't think it would help this much to ask you guys for advice, but I've read each and every one of your comments, and dear God, I feel 1,000 times better than I did a few hours ago. Thank you, like I feel so different. It's weird. Now for some final comments. Gosh, OP, he was just confused for 6 months that you know about. Honestly, they're all trash. Cheaters are trash. Friends that cover for them are trash. I hope OP gives Tara a heads up. It's not even the cheating that shocks me. He called the woman he was going to propose to crying, begging to talk, while with the affair partner, and constantly called her. The audacity. Glad the affair partner knows that she isn't special. He called one the one that he actually wanted and royally screwed things up with while in her presence. She knows that she's not his first choice. May that thought haunt her every time she's about to drift off to sleep. He was confused, ended a 5-year relationship with OP, has been cheating on her with a girl who knows he has a girlfriend, and now that he was caught he's confused and crying? Nah, that's just panic. Opie now knows he's a coward and a cheater. Mike, you also ain't crap. I'm guessing in this dumb guy's brain, proposing seemed like a good way to make up to Opie for cheating on her, and maybe he'd be able to settle once things got more serious. But then when the time came, he realised putting a ring on her finger wasn't going to make her any more desirable for him, nor make him go exclusive, so he quit trying. For OP's sake, I'm glad the trash took itself out before their lives could get more entangled. Yeah, silver linings. What do you guys think about this story? Plenty to say, I'm sure. Let me know in the comments. Either way, we're going to move on again. Okay, this next one was posted on Am I the A-Hole and Relationship Advice. It was written by a throwaway account, and it's titled, Am I the A-Hole for losing my cool with my parents for pushing me to forgive my cheating ex? I was to be married in July. 2 months ago, I came home from a work trip to find my ex-fiancé in bed with my BFF's sister. I kicked him out, cancelling the wedding, warned him I would get rid of his stuff if he didn't come get it all, then weeks later dumped it all on the curbside with a free sign, sold or donated or dumped everything he gave me, and pawned the ring. I blocked him everywhere, called the cops on him when he showed up after I gave his stuff away, banging on my door, called them again when he turned up at my workplace and made a scene, and called them on his family when they showed up en masse to plead his case. I didn't go scorched earth on ex-BFF's sister. I did tell her husband I caught her in bed with my ex. Last I heard, she'd been kicked out of the house and was back living with her parents. Ex's BFF tried talking me into giving them both a chance to explain. What? No. Then got angry at me for ruining her sister's relationship, called me petty and cold-hearted, so I kicked her to the curb too. I don't want dishonest people that are blasé about betrayal in my life. This encounter no doubt simmered under my skin until I unleashed on my parents. Maybe that's the reason, because it lingered, I was so harsh with them. Last week I met my parents for dinner. I took a date with me to the restaurant, hoping his being there would waylay any discussion about my failed engagement. My parents have been pressuring me to work things out with the ex. He's so sorry. I owe it to him to talk with him, give him 5 minutes to explain himself. She meant nothing to him. He made a mistake. I'm cruel for shutting him out the way I have. How could I call the police on him? How could I do the same to his family, his parents? They're good people. They didn't deserve to be humiliated in that manner. He's having a rough time. He's depressed. Everyone is worried about him. He loves me, really loves me. He's learned his lesson. It's time to grow up and forgive him. No, my date's presence didn't stop them from bringing it all up again. I lost my cool. I asked my father if he expected me to give my ex a pass every time he sticks his dick into anything that moves, like he does. I asked my mother how turning a blind eye to her husband's infidelity works for her. How does she hold her head up while having lunch with women that have slept around with her husband for years? Is that the kind of men, the life she wants for me and my sister, for her daughters? I asked if they had any idea of the impact that knowledge had on me and my siblings growing up. Knowing that Dad was late home from work because he was screwing his secretary. Knowing work weekend was code for dirty weekend with a woman, not our mother. Did they not know why it was that of their 4 children, I am the only one that still talks to them? Do they not question why they were not invited to my brother's weddings? Why they have never met either of my brother's wives and children? Did they think my sister's silence is because she's being dramatic and throwing a tantrum? Really? I stood from the table, congratulated them on the loss of their last remaining child, and told them I hoped their arrogance, willful blindness, and misery was a comfort to them to their last breaths. Then I left. My date, I should have saved him for a proper date rather than an FU to my parents, took me to the nearest bar, let me cry on his shoulder while I proceeded to get crap-faced, then made sure I got home safely. The next day he messaged me to see if I was alive, and sent a double cheeseburger, large fries, and a large Sprite over with DoorDash. I didn't block my parents, but I haven't heard from them. It's been a week and I've calmed down enough to feel regret, not for what I said, but because I can see the looks on their faces when I made my final farewell. I crushed them, hurt them, especially my mother. Despite their faults, and there are many, I love my parents. I don't like knowing I hurt them. I'm feeling a lot of guilt about it. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I have yet to read all the comments, but from what I've seen so far, I think some details need to be cleared up. My date knew we were going to have dinner with my parents. He asked me out that morning. I told him my plans for the evening and jokingly asked if he wanted to come along. I didn't expect him to say yes. I then informed him I wasn't serious, and anyway it would probably be a little uncomfortable, and he said if needed he could post bail. So there you go. He did not enter that restaurant unaware of potential drama. Edit 2. The people mentioned in my post are not the only people in my life. I have my siblings in my life. They didn't cut me off. My sister flew in to be with me just days after I discovered the cheating. And I have good friends. Friends who helped me pack up X's things. Helped me to move it all down to the curb. A friend that found me a guy that paid a fair price for the engagement ring. I only mentioned X, ex-BFF, etc. because how they acted and what they were saying contributed to all those buried feelings that had been dormant for years coming out when they did, in the way that they did. Someone comments on X's parents. Opie says, my ex's parents are on the periphery of my parents' circle, and I have no doubt that they know all about my father's too many to count infidelities. I can well imagine that they expected me to put up with the same disrespect my mother has all these years. One comment says, you love your parents but you don't like them nor their decisions. Completely makes sense given what you've told us about your childhood and their recent behaviour. What do you need them to do to remain in your life as non-toxic? Think about that. What do you need them to do? What would be the ideal and what would be the bare minimum? Opie replies, ideally, I'd like my mother to leave my father and take him for everything. That will never happen. Another thing that won't ever happen is my father practicing discretion. What do they care for the humiliation they forced on us? Knowing their own needs and desires will always be prioritized over anyone else's, I'd settle for an acknowledgement of the hurt we've endured for most of our lives. But I don't think I should hold my breath for that. Could well be that seeing how her mum sees nothing amiss with her partner cheating and how Opie seemed to have no issue with it, that's why the ex thought there'd be no consequences for him either. Opie replies, I can't see how people would think that. I didn't talk about it ever with anyone but my sister. Even then we were both drunk and high when it came up. Of course others would think I accepted that things were as they were. Of course they would. It's not like anyone asked if I was okay with it, so how could they be expected to know that I wasn't? I understand that point of view. Opie replies to a downvoted comment. My parents' choices had a direct and negative impact on my life and the lives of my siblings. If their choices had been discreet and not an open secret that we all learned about in late childhood and early teens, then maybe we wouldn't have had to live under the weight of the knowledge. But we did, and that's on them. Why should I have let anyone speak on behalf of the man who cheated on me? They went from almost being my family to people I'd rather avoid in an instant. I don't have to justify that to them, just like I don't have to listen to whatever BS they were geared up to tell me. My unwillingness to hear them out said everything I needed to say. I'll own entitled B because I am entitled to my peace of mind. The ring being the ex's legally. Not in my state. He gave it to me. It was mine to do with as I pleased. It pleased me to pawn it. One comment says, I'm curious though, you and your siblings were so affected by your father's infidelity growing up because your mother didn't care, or because you saw how much it hurt her but she put up with it? Opie says, I can only speak for myself. My father's infidelity was an open secret. We were probably the last ones to know, but we couldn't avoid knowing, and we couldn't share, not even with each other. I figured out it was a secret that everyone knew, everyone ignored it, and no one talked about it. Therefore, it was shameful. It became painful when I realized my mother knew. I started to understand why she would start to tense up when my father didn't arrive home at a specific time, why I could hear her crying in her room after we'd gone to bed, why her and my father would argue when he went away for whole weekends at a time, why she would start banging pots around in the kitchen when he would come home and head straight for the shower. All these things and more that caused my mother hurt. Then to realize that she was in part responsible for her own pain by not doing anything to stop from being hurt by him, it messed me up. But I loved my mother and I loved my father, so I kept silent about the secret, and that messed me up more. What I want to know is if they argued back. Did they defend themselves? Did your mum say I did it to keep the family together? She really thought none of you knew? Grandparents' paternal side probably told your mum to look away. It was normal. Opie replies, They didn't sit there passively while I went off my half-cooked, but they didn't make a scene. Or, most likely, my scene overshadowed theirs. I don't really remember exactly what they said. There was a lower your voice, don't speak to your mother like that, and I can't believe you're choosing to do this now. I think there may have been a we can discuss this later. Opie updates 6 months later. It's been a minute since I was here last. Life has been busy, work has been busy, and updating Reddit wasn't on my mind. Apologies to all those that continue to send messages asking for an update. I figure better late than never. A quick recap. Lost my temper with my parents when they tried to push me to forgive and reconcile with my cheating ex. Some really hurtful and harsh truths were shared by me to them in that moment. Afterwards I felt tremendous guilt. The regret started to eat at me. Where to start? First, a thank you to all who replied to my post. I tried to read every comment, and though I didn't post for the validation most of you gave, receiving it did lighten the load a little bit. It didn't take away from the guilt I carried, but I was able to work through that to see that, although my timing was off, what I said was absolutely necessary. Thank you too to some of those that sent me private messages rather than posting on the main thread. Having read your own stories of a similar upbringing, conversing with you has helped me to understand that my childhood and teens were traumatic, that those years left wounds that I'd never addressed until this all came about. One more shout out to those that sent harassing messages about my choices, those people that preached about the sanctity of marriage and how men are basic creatures with basic needs, those that attempted to school me in how to be a woman that needs to learn to do my duty by allowing a man his vices, and that it was really all my fault for not supporting my ex in his time of need. Special shout out to the man that offered to teach me how to be submissive and learn my place in this world. And last but not least, the sweet little chicken nugget that told me my reaction was proof that I'm a serial cheater, and my ex should have used a cattle prod on my happy place. It must have been tough for all of you when your women left. Big props to those ladies for escaping a life of misery with you. Now for what has happened since. My mother left my father not long after my post, maybe a couple of weeks after. She showed up at my apartment one night with her luggage. I can't explain how broken and pitiful she was. I brought her inside, held her, and my heart broke for her. I realized then that she had no one else she could turn to, absolutely no one. No family, no friends. I cannot help but wonder if she'd been all alone for all the years of her marriage, and if me or one of my siblings had said something sooner, would she have had the courage to leave my father then? I'd never seen my mother, usually so dignified and unruffled, look so broken. It shocked me to see her that way. It worried me so much that I made her sleep in my bed with me. I called my siblings, and within days they all came to show support and love. Then it was me, my mother, and my sister sleeping in my bed. It was good for her to see that her children still cared, because we did care, we did love her. It was the situation my siblings distanced themselves from. At first, my mother stayed with me. She was having a hard time of it. Years of humiliation, shame, and guilt ate at her. I was worried about her state of mind and didn't like to leave her alone. I couldn't take time off of work to be with her every second of the day, so I took her to the shelter and we got her a dog. My thinking was if she had something to take care of, it would distract her from dark thoughts. I was hoping for a puppy because they're playful and would keep her busy, but she fell in love with a 5-year-old mixed breed, and he fell right back. He's a goof. We don't know how it happened, but we woke up one night to him howling because he'd somehow wedged his head in between the spindles on the stairs. His whole head. We had to call the fire department to rescue him. Of course, my mother didn't think he was at fault, and she now refers to him as her baby. He adores my mother, though. My oldest brother moved some things around, then moved her across the country to live with him and his family. He thought she would do better if there was no chance of her running into Dad or one of his many women. He found her a therapist, and that seems to be working. She's loving being a grandmother, and all reports are that she is an indulgent one. She has a separate in-law suite, so she gets to see them every day. My brother tells me when the kids go missing, they can now be found at Grandma's. My dad is my dad. He doesn't lack for company. I had a dinner with him not long after my mother moved across the country, where he introduced me to the new woman in his life. I reminded them both that I knew exactly who she was, considering she called my mother her best friend for all my life. Cue another awkward dinner. My dad tried to make it as pleasant as he could, but whenever she spoke to me, I would bring up a memory from my childhood of her spending time with their family, and ask if she was sleeping with my father all the way back then. The next day he called to tell me how disappointed he was with me. I felt it only fair to share my own disappointments. We argued for a bit. He tried to downplay all he'd done over the years, tried to play the victim of his own actions. I ended up cutting the conversation short and blocking him. It was just over a month ago when he showed up at my door. I wouldn't let him in, and I'm sure that rattled him some. He told me he didn't want to lose me too. Say what you want about him, but he is my dad. I love him. I don't want to lose him either. He promised he wouldn't force me to interact with any of his women. So far, we've had a couple of pleasant outings that have gone well so far. I'm cautiously hopeful that we can continue to be in each other's lives. As for me, well, I took that advice some of you gave me and I'm in therapy. It is humbling to come to the realization that though you may think you're fine, you are actually not. It has almost been unbearable to face all that history and excruciatingly painful to dig through it all. At the end of some sessions, all I want to do is head to the nearest bar and drink until I forget all about what I just went through to find out where it all started and why I am the way I am. I think therapy is one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I don't know how some of you have been doing it for as long as you have. I also don't know why you do it so willingly. I'm a crazy nutter for listening to all you nutters in the first place, but it is helping. Now for the update most of you want. I cannot even tell you how many messages I continue to receive from people wanting to know about him. It was almost like you were all saying, "Girl, we don't care about whatever life crisis you're going through, just tell us about the date." Well, I haven't replied to any of those queries because my post wasn't about him. Now, I figure in a roundabout way, I owe you something because you all played a part in where we are today. I won't give a rundown of everything that has happened between us, but I will give you a few things. He contacted me after seeing a podcast on YouTube. He sent me a link with the query, "Is this you?" It would be an understatement to say I was mortified. My mortification kept me from replying to him. I was so deep in my embarrassment that I didn't even bother to read the messages he sent me over the next couple of weeks. When I finally did read them, it was to find a whole heap of screenshots of people's comments. I'm going out on a limb by saying you don't need me to tell you the contents of the comments he was sending me. I eventually got back to him. It was difficult for us to make time to see each other. As I stated earlier, my life, both personal and professional, has been very busy. He also has a life and work. We were only able to meet up for coffee a couple of times. I didn't think we were going to be able to grow a friendship, let alone anything beyond that. I've since learned that he is tenacious and persistent, like a dog with a bone. He kept at it until we find a time to go on a second date. That date went well and led to another. Then he introduced me to the two most important people in his life, his grandparents. His grandfather carves little wooden figurines, and I have since acquired a flock of wooden birds. His grandmother thinks I'm too skinny. She feeds me whenever I see her, and usually sends me home with food. He gets along with my sister and brothers. He came with me to visit my mother on her birthday and met them all. He was very gracious with her. I had him saved in my phone as Cheeseburger. He took issue with that because he bought me a double cheeseburger, so I started calling him Double Cheese, and then shortened that to DC. He's still saved in my phone as Cheeseburger. He's an undercover Swiftie, and I don't quite know what to do with that. I don't have anything against Taylor Swift, but I sure didn't pick him to love her. He did use his little sister and niece as cover for his Taylor Swift love. Now he uses me. I'm fine with being so used. Okay guys, and that's a pretty great update to end on. Sounds like all things are going well with OP, and I'm glad this new guy sounds like he's got plenty of personality as well. My thoughts are with the mother too. Can't imagine that would have been easy. Anyway guys, we're going to leave that one there. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Either way, that's it from me today. I hope you guys enjoyed those stories. Thanks for making it to the end, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good day. Cheers.